Hi, hello everyone. My name is Martyna and I work in Allegro as a senior product analyst, and I analyze products or tools for our merchants. And as I am very passionate about turning numbers into insights or data into insights, we will together chat today about how to make your data or data speak. And first, I will take you back to school since it's still fall here in Poland. And I would like to ask you, what did you dislike most about school? And I hope that not too many of you answer it was maths. But don't worry, we won't calculate anything today. And I have to admit that I was not very fond on geography. Of course, there were many fascinating things there, like tectonic movements and volcanoes and so on. But there were also these statistical tables that I had to memorize. Yes, memorize. And sweet mother of God, why remember how many tons of fish a given country exports? Like in this Polish classic meme, who needs it? What for? And I have to say that I hated those tables for one reason. They didn't say anything. I mean, they were full of data, of course, but the data said nothing. Because contrary to the saying, data does not speak for itself. It's you who need to give them context, structure, and draw conclusions. And thanks to this, we can, for example, suddenly notice that Iceland, which is a country with a population similar to Bydgoszcz or Brno, is the fifth largest exporter of fish to the European Union. And that fish is so important to that country that the only major conflict Iceland was ever involved in is called the Cod Wars. And there is a person who once found out that data does not speak for themselves, and it was a Hungarian doctor called Ignaz Semmelweis, whose story I learned thanks to the fantastic book by Brent Dykes. And when in the middle of the 19th century, Ignaz started working at the Vienna General Hospital, he suddenly became worried about the high mortality rate among women in childbirth. And in the clinic run by doctors, the violet line, it was much higher than in the other one run by midwives. It's the orange one on the chart. And women were dying of a mysterious disease known at this time as childbed fever. And as a result of some tragic events, Semmelweis discovered that the probable cause was that doctors did not properly wash their hands after they were performing autopsies in the morning. So he recommended his colleagues to carefully wash their hands, and it brought fantastic results because the mortality rate dropped by over 80%. So Ignaz had numerical evidence of the effectiveness of his action, but still he failed to successfully convince the medical community to continue to follow this recommendation, this washing hands recommendations. And perhaps because this chart was never made. Instead, Semmelweis used this table, which you have to admit is as uninteresting as those from my geography lessons, from my geography statistical tables. And meanwhile, in Victorian London, a certain John Snow became convinced that a good data story has a great power, but not this John Snow, this one. And Paulina Bednarek talked about this today in details, but for those who haven't watched her presentation, I will briefly summarize the story. And during the cholera epidemic, as well in the 19th century, Snow, who was skeptical of the popular plague air theory, or morowe powietrze in Polish, he discovered that the source of the epidemic could be one water pump on Broad Street. And John managed to convince the city authorities, the London city authorities, to shut down the pump. and the epidemic began to subside almost immediately. And the main thing that he had to do to convince the authorities was to put the cases on the map. And it was difficult to argue with such a visual and such a story. So, as you can see, data storytelling can save lives. And if that doesn't convince you, let me add that Jon Snow was honored a few years later with a pub in London named after him. So, how cool is that? And the pub still exists, as does the famous pub. So, next time you will visit London, don't forget to take a photo. But okay, why does it work? Why do stories affect us so much more effectively than dry facts? And why Snow succeeded and Semmelweis failed? I guess the answer lies in our brains. And neuroimaging research reveals that facts and numbers activate long language processing and comprehension brain areas, the red and orange boxes and the dots on this slide. While in contrast, when we hear a story, our brain activity resembles, I would say, a disco ball, because it's engaging various regions responsible for memory, color, shape, and even smell and touch. And additionally, the release of oxytocin, dopamine, and cortisol sustains our attention, fosters our emotional connection, enhances recall, and of course boosts the speaker's perceived trustworthiness. What's more, emotions that can be triggered by stories are also crucial for decision making. And it's demonstrated in the famous Antonio Damasio research from 2000. And according to Damasio, people with damage in the emotional processing area in their brain struggled with even basic decisions like choosing what to eat for lunch or where to go for the lunch. So presenting facts alone can be time efficient, I would say, but not necessarily effective. And by adding an emotional component, the pathos here on the graph, we complete our rhetoric. And I would say that is why we need data storytelling. So if we need it, how do we can use it? And of course, the first ingredient in our recipe is data. And of course, it is crucial that this data is reliable and of good quality, because, like they say, garbage in, garbage out. As far as I remember, there is even a session today and at this conference called Garbage In, Garbage Out. But also it is crucial that the data are relevant and close to your listeners and readers, so for your audience. And before you start working with data, before you even write a single line of code, please think about what you know about your audience. What are their goals, their priorities, expectations? Maybe they have specific questions or needs, or they have to make some decisions based on your data. And also remember that you don't really have to present all of your data, but only insights. And not every observation can be an insight. Because insight, according to the definition of the psychologist Gary Klein, is an unexpected change in the way that we understand things. So when you are seeking insights, please focus on unexpected changes, unusual distributions, let's say discrepancies between segments or between your data and benchmarks. Because these changes are often signs that something significant from a business perspective is happening. And of course, it's crucial to investigate the underlying reasons below these changes, because these discoveries can constitute our primary insights. So we have our insights. So it's time for a story that will engage our audience. And if you never tried to create or craft one, please don't worry, because there are recipes for that as well. And one of them that I like the most, called the storytelling arc, is presented in this book by Brent Dykes that I've already mentioned. And the first element, or the first stage here, is setting. And at the stage, we tell what data we are looking at, what the context is, what the status quo is, what typical patterns we see in the data. And it's like, in the movies, the first scenes when we meet our hero, and we see where he works, who his friends are, and so on and so on. So this is like setting in movies. And this, as I said, also a moment when we can introduce the hero of our story, if we had one. And this can be, for example, our company, but also its typical customer. And after such an introduction, the setting, it is time to drop the so-called hook. And it's the moment when we show some significant change in the data. And this may be the aforementioned increases, decreases, or other types of unexpected or counterintuitive data. And it's something that will allow us to keep our audience, our listeners' attention, and make them think, wow, that's interesting. I want to know more about it. Tell me something more about it. And this is also the moment when we can introduce our anti-hero, if we have one. And as I am looking at this tiny red icon, it reminds me about my favorite movie called Rocketman, where is that theme used, and the theme is very similar to the concept of the hook. And the theme is called How Did I Get There? You might remember something like this from many other movies, for example, in American Beauty. And in this theme, we begin with a powerful hit and then trace the journey that brought the protagonist, or our hero, to that point. And here, in the opening scene of Rocketman, Taron Egerton, who brilliantly plays Elton John in a second costume with red wings and horns, opens the door to a rehab clinic. And this sets the stage for the rest of the movie's narrative. And the rest of the movie shows us how Elton gets there and why Elton gets there. Okay, so we've got our hook, and now it's time for present further discoveries, further insights that will lead us to the aha moment, which is our main insights. But we shouldn't stop here. We shouldn't end here, because in addition to an insight, we should also present conclusions and recommendations. And that's the phase that we often forget about, and we shouldn't forget about. And what kind of story, how we will tell it, who will be its hero and anti-hero, should be, of course, closely matched to the audience. So that on the one hand, the story is understandable for them, and on the other hand, it's, I would say, close or resonant or relevant to our audience as well. And here's our next teacher, former Polish deputy minister, Janusz Piechociński, now a Twitter star, or maybe I should say an ex-star, who shares dozens of such tweets daily. And he's here to teach us that such data without story is, I would say, insignificant or irrelevant. And for our foreign listeners, I will only explain that the Żabka is the name of a grocery franchise chain here in Poland. And what does this tweet tells us? What does it tell us that the chain has 400 stores in Krakow? Is it a lot? I think it is. Is it more than other grocery stores, grocery chains? Is it more than a year ago? Or maybe Kraków is the city with the highest density of żabkas in Poland. And first of all, why should I care? You see so many questions, and I would say no answers. But the next tweet looks much better, and I would say there is a story, there is a turning point, even a hero. I mean, European countries. Still, there is no conclusion and next steps. But admitted, this post or this tweet looks much more interesting than the first one. Okay, we have one more key piece of our puzzle left, and it's telling. And in the case of data storytelling, we often associate it with the visual aspect, or to be precise with charts. So how do you choose, or how do we choose the right chart? And first of all, the chart should match the type of data and type of story that you want to present. And so a natural choice for, I would say, presentation of data over time, the red bar. Over time, maybe a line chart or a bar chart. And while we are talking about any comparisons or ranking, bar charts were great. And if we want to, for example, show individual parts of a whole, you will probably think about stacked bar charts, tree maps charts, or pie charts. But the latter, however, are not often the best choice. And here is why. Because our charts should also be, I would say, legible and understandable. And research done by William Cleveland and Robert McGill helps us understand what types of visuals or what types of graphs are easier to read and convey the information more effectively. And when we look at where the bar chart is, and we look at where the pie chart is located on this scale, the situation becomes clear. Anyway, let's look at an example. Can you read this chart? I guess you can. I guess you can say what Rick Astley is never gonna. But can you do this easily and quickly? I guess that really. And not only because some of you probably start singing or humming in your mind like I did. First, comparing angles and surfaces isn't super easy for our brains, as Cleveland and McGill showed us. And our brain can't do this with much precision. And secondly, there is a lot going on here. You have to admit. The chart is complex, have multiple series, so we need different colors, we need a legend, we need data labels for clarity, and our little cognitive battery is slowly getting fed up. And see how much easier and how much faster is to read a bar chart. And we don't want our audience to, I would say, waste time decoding the graph. They are supposed to understand it in the blink of an eye and focus on what we are telling them, what the story is. And by the way, in the case of the bar chart, we could have used far fewer elements to convey exactly the same information. So our little cognitive battery is doing much better, I would say. And that is why one of the most important data storytelling techniques is the so-called decluttering, which means getting rid of unnecessary elements. And there is even a special formula, the so-called data ink ratio, that shows the extent to which our visualizations or graphs focuses on data and not on decorations. But let's look at another example. I think that again our cognitive battery is running low. So what can we get rid of? Certainly all the colors and legends, because the series are already described. Then having data labels, we can also resign from the horizontal axis with peace of mind. And the border, the background or grid, I would say don't add anything either. And in addition, if we decide to add the title, then axis descriptions will also become redundant and we can get rid of them. So this is the end result of our changes. I think it's much better, but let me rickroll you once again. By getting rid of many elements here, including unnecessary colors, we were able to use these elements here in a more thoughtful way. In this case, for I would say drawing the viewer attention to a series that differs from the others. And color is one of the most effective of so-called pre-attentive attributes. And pre-attentive attributes are information that we can rapidly process visually, even before engaging our attention processing brain regions or areas. And wise use or thoughtful use of pre-attentive attributes can make even more advanced, more complicated charts easier to understand. Like here, and in this scatter plot that I found in an excellent speech by Isaac Rice, the so-called enclosure is used to divide Robert De Niro career into two stages. The blue one and the, the pink or the red one. And thanks to this, we can discover that the exact moment when he stopped caring is supposed to be at 59. Okay, and of course, when we are selecting and polishing our charts, we must first of all take into account or into consideration our audience, of course, and their preferences and their habits in relation to visualizations. And let's choose those charts that are familiar to them. And if we have to use something more complicated, then please use the power of pre-attentive attributes to make it more familiar. But of course, charts are not everything, because we need words. And I think it is best to start a conversation about words in data storytelling with the titles of the slides. And I know that we are used to chart titles being factual and neutral, like the third line here. And I think that's great. But slide titles, not graph titles, but slide titles, don't have to, and I think shouldn't be like that. Instead, let's share some insights from the content of the chart itself. And these kinds of titles support the context and tell the audience what they should focus on. So when constructing titles, remember that words have the power, and words can carry an emotional charge. And this emotional charge can further support our story, as we learned at the beginning of this presentation. Okay, but sometimes words are even all you need. There are many techniques to tell data stories without charts, and one of my favorite is a technique of creating the so-called model. And it was once used with a great success by protesting Icelandic women. And you might heard that since 2018 in Iceland, companies with over 25 employees must obtain a certificate for fair pay policies between women and men. And however, prior to this law, Icelandic women occasionally took streets and protested the wage gap. which was 14% or 17%, depending on the assumptions. And this is obviously unfair, but it sounds too abstract for the banners, like 40% of pay gap. So Icelandic women decided to illustrate the gap more practically, and they represented this as a working day. And this model reveals that Icelandic women worked, I would say, for free, starting from 1438. And on the anniversary of the famous 1975 protests, Icelandic women left work at that time, for 1438, and it involves everyone in this performance, even including men who had to stay at work while their friends, girlfriends, wives, and sisters protested with the famous "Who," or the Viking chant, which you may remember from football fields. And of course, these women could use another model, for example, the calendar year, and the result probably would be just as shocking, because the free work would start about November. But the chosen day model allowed women to turn this information into action, which was leaving work earlier, and this gave much more impression. And sometimes for a good data storytelling, we don't even need to show any data or any numbers. And this is clearly shown by my favorite example from the book called Making Numbers Count, or Liczby się liczą in Polish. And it says that there are more men named James in the Fortune 500 list than all women combined. Fortunately, since 2025, this is finally not longer true. And to note that no number is mentioned here, apart from the name of the list, Fortune 500. And this makes the message even stronger, not weaker, but even stronger. And a similar lesson is given to us by Leonardo DiCaprio, or rather by tweets that appeared at the beginning of this year, and when his photos with a 19-year-old model hit the internet. And here you have some of the most popular ones. And why are those tweets so powerful, so popular? If we just read the age difference in this relationship, many would probably just shrug, because after all, the actor is famous for his young companions, young girlfriends. But when we add to it the context close to the audience, the matter begins to look completely different. Because most of us, I think, remember how old we were when Titanic hit theaters. And perhaps maybe right now you are thinking about what that moment in your life was like. And that's exactly the point. And we realized that it was quite a long time ago, and Leo was already a grown man by then. And on the other hand, the second tweet, the COVID-19 pandemic is still remembered as a fairly fresh experience. So it is for us surprising how old the model, the girlfriend was then. Speaking of words, as a former journalist, I cannot refrain from mentioning the principles or the rules that once guided me while I was writing press texts. And they were once well formulated by The Economist in its style guide that you can even download or buy and read. And the first principle is never use a metaphor, simile, or other figure of speech. And that's the one rule that I wouldn't implement for data storytelling, because in fact a good simile and good metaphor can be a game changer in terms of understanding the data. So use it. Second rule, never use a long word where a short one will do. Third, if it's possible to cut out a word, always cut it out. Never use the passive side where you can use the active. And never use a foreign phrase, a scientific word, or a jargon word if you can think of an everyday Polish or English equivalent. And of course, break any of these rules if you think it will do better in your example. Okay, but enough theory, time for some practice. And we will try to make a makeover of a chart, which is already very nice, very beautiful, which at the start melts my heart. But let's see, can it be better? I would start with what I like about this, and of course I like limited numbers of colors and no unnecessary elements like scale if we have values in the labels. I like the cool color references in the subtitle, so we don't need the legend anymore thanks to this. And I like that all additional elements, such lines, are very subtle. I'm not sure if you even notice those lines. But what's not in it? What's not okay with these charts? I would say that there are so many bars that it's hard to compare anything. And the yellow color, especially in combination with gray, like here, suggests us something important, but there is too much or that much of this importance that I personally don't know what to look at. Should I pay attention to a specific title, specific movie, or maybe I don't know, newer or older movies have better rankings, or I don't know what is the author of this graph trying to tell me with this. And unfortunately, even the title is strictly descriptive, so it also does not say what I should pay attention to. And this is my proposal. And what have I changed? Of course, I choose a different type of chart, as you can see, because I think that two different metrics are easier to compare on a scatter plot, especially if we have a lot of data series like we do here in this example. And I tried to look for a story on this chart, and I choose two versions. The first one, as you can see, is that the second part of Maleficent is liked by the audience, but not that much by critics. And the other version is that Jungle Book is liked by literally everyone. And I subordinated entire charts to these stories. I use a contrasting color for the chosen title, chosen movie, and the other data points are only for context, so they are gray. I use a title referring to an insight and a color reference in the title to draw attention to it. I also added an eye-catching graphic element, the yellow element, to the title once again to catch attention, draw attention to the title. And of course, this graph was created in Google Spreadsheets in like 30 minutes, so it's far from perfect. But I will say that I think that the story seems to fit well. Of course, I could also choose a different type of chart, for example, a dot plot chart, but I think that this scatter plot tells my story more effectively. Okay, so to sum up, how to be a good data storyteller. First, look for insights that are valuable and important to your audience. Then create or craft stories that are meaningful to them. Third, use the visuals that supports your stories best. And fourth, get rid of the chart junk or clutter and use pre-attentive attributes to draw attention to what's the most important on your graph. And fifth, of course, use the power of words. And please get inspired by everything, by books, movies, magazines, good and bad graphs, good and bad designs, graphic novels, comics, and so on and so on. And if you cut the bug, and I hope that some of you did, here are some recommendations for additional materials that can be found under the attached QR code or attached URL. and you will find there some books, some videos, and some authors to follow that will help you learn more about storytelling with data. So here it is once again. You can scan it. And of course, I cannot promise that you will get a pub in the center of London after all this, but you will most likely be more successful at work. And thank you for having me. I hope you will have a wonderful day. I will look at the chat if there are any questions. I think there are no questions, so I will give you a few more minutes. And if nothing pops up, then I will give the stage to another speaker, to the next speaker. And if you have no questions, you can use this time to scan the QR code. Okay, nothing on the chat. So thank you once again for having me, and have a wonderful day at the conference.